Most of the former residents of Merasheen don't live far from the island, but for this reunion they came from across the province, the mainland, the United States, and as far away as Germany. Excitement grew during the 2-hour boat crossing from Argentia. And finally, through the familiar rain and fog, Merasheen.
We love you, hooray! What though the world be great or small, old Merasheen will win over all. While our boys and girls are marching onward to victory. Hey!
Many of these people hadn't seen each other in years. On the dock, the first of many reunions that would take place during the next 5 days. Tents would be home, a general store would provide the necessities, and for a while Merasheen would once again be a community. There were no organized events at this reunion. It was mostly a time for renewing old friendships. And what memories there must be of this place. Strolling around the beautiful, now ghost-like hills, overgrown paths where once there were roads. Houses left in ruins, traces of a life long left behind.
There's so much devastation. You look at the house, they're destroyed and falling down. Everything is so compact and so close together, and it wasn't like that. I guess because of all of the grass and everything has grown wild. And the homes were well kept, and even the little brook that passed down by the road was dug out every year, and the bridge was repaired. Now, get over that and you get bogged in water.
How do you feel seeing your house there, your yellow house?
Oh, that's awful looking at that.
What was it like when you were living in it?
Oh, it was a beautiful home. It was, I don't know, one of the largest on the island, I guess. And Mama always kept it up well. We had a beautiful flower garden there. There was a headstone in our front yard. We didn't never mind that. Our kids were played around it. And all around we had cabbage patches. We grew our own vegetables. And I can't see now where we could do that, I mean, the space is still there, apparently.
You're living in Hamilton now. Do you ever think of coming back to stay, or can you do that, do you think? Would you want to do that?
No. Our life is quite different. I wouldn't want to change it right now. I wouldn't mind coming back here when I retire. It'd be beautiful. But right now, Hamilton is our home.
How does it feel to see all these people that you grew up with and related to?
You don't only have relatives here. We have relatives, but I mean, you have friends too. The people that you grew up with, neighbours and friends, are just as close as relatives. So everybody knew everybody else, and you're so close. You don't even get that in Placentia. You don't get. I don't know if you get it anywhere else in Newfoundland, unless you have a little small community. Everybody depends on everybody else, completely.
That must have been something coming in on that boat yesterday, was it?
Yes. That was
all the memories come flooding back?
Yes. That was an adventure, in spite of the rain.
The island was settled, some say, in the early 16th century by French people and by English who wanted to stay during the winter months. Legend has it that 2 Frenchmen were the first to arrive here, one named Mere, the other Jean, later to become Merasheen.
This is your father's
He died
grave,
at the age of 78, right?
Yeah.
And it was 1948. He died in 1948 at the age of 78.
So it's more than 100 years.
Oh, there's 7. Yeah. It's over 100 years. When he was 18 years of age, he left in company with 2 other boats to go fishing in Labrador. He was skipper a boat called St. Paul. So he fished all down Newfoundland coast on the eastern side, and he came up through the Straits and fished up the Magdalen Islands, came back here, and like I was just telling Bill, when he turned this point right here with a load of fish, he broke off his mammoth, and they ended up in St. Pierre in a couple of days, and out in the worst storms that ever he was out in his life.
How long ago was that? When was that?
That's about 110 years ago. Is it 110 or 12 years ago? It had to be a fairly well-to-do family because the people at that time couldn't afford it as long as most people. But they had to be a fairly well-to-do family. So to even be able to buy these headstones in the 18th century.
They were the only French family here, from what you can remember, anyway.
Yes, except this Ennis. Our family of Ennises.
That married into the Mobile.
No, this Ennis family was supposed to be French too, because my great-grandfather spoke French, so therefore he was a Frenchman. This Mobile lived up in that section of town, and the Ennises lived in this section. Now, of course, you were there for several years, and because we were all wooded and everything, and one didn't know the other was there until they met in the woods. That's how they met.
And they started marrying each other.
Yeah, started marrying each other then, yeah.
Part of the history of this island is the close ties that still exist between the people. The population was small. It peaked in 1921 with 380 people. They were isolated, and religion was perhaps the major influence in their lives. Monsignor Fyme, a Dutch priest, played a special role in developing the community.
But about 1933, he moved to Merasheen. And he certainly, he found people who had leadership qualities, and he helped them develop. And with these people, he started working to build a real close-knit community. It was his leadership that I would think led to the establishment of the community efforts that we mentioned earlier, like the credit union, the cooperative, and the other things that came about. The church continued to build on what had been planted. You know, the clergy in particular, the priests who followed after Monsignor Fyme, they built on what he had prepared. They continued the development of the people. Well, the closeness never really died. The younger people of Merasheen, of the last years before resettlement, they were true-blooded Merasheeners in the same sense. They certainly held on to the traditions of their ancestors, their forefathers, and they were very attached to Merasheen. The way of life, you see, that developed in the 30s and 40s and 50s, it hung on. It stuck.
That spirit was very much alive at this reunion. The fishery was always the mainstay of the island's economy, and even though Merasheen was empty of permanent settlers by 1968, fishermen still come here every year to fish mainly for cod between April and October. National Sea Products has a plant on the island. Some of the men, now in their 60s and 70s, are still fishing the waters off Merasheen.
You went over to Placentia in '68. How'd you feel about
68.
that?
I didn't feel a bit too good about it.
Why is that?
Well, it changed my way of life anyhow. My way of living, everything else.
What did you do when you went over to Placentia?
Never one thing. I 3 years in there and earned 1 pack of cigarettes.
What was it like here, growing up here?
Wonderful.
Everybody knew everybody else?
Sure.
Yeah.
Everyone's your friend.
What about the fishery now? How much longer are you going to be at that, do you think?
Well, how many years?
Yeah.
As long as I get my health. Never long that. Couldn't go at anything any better.
And if you drop in on those fishermen whose lives have centered around this island, you're going to hear some stories, like the one about the Great August Gale back in 1927.
We had an old fellow with us, about 65, Jack Stevenson from Black Harbour. And when we got married, we made that odd, and he said, "Is that the bald head of Merasheen?" And I said, "I don't think." Never mind, I don't think, he said. "Make sure." And I said, "No, sir, that's not the bald head of Merasheen." "Thanks be to God," he said, "the stone head red oil." Yeah. And he said, "What did you think of it today?" I said, "I should be asking you that."
Yeah.
Because I said, I was never named that this no, by God, he said, neither was I.
No.
Or don't want to do it again.
No.
He said, "It's great to be like you." I didn't think no more than that. I was a young fella.
Traditions are well remembered.
You had to be home for Lady Day, but if you're on the Grand Banks. Well, I put that on the Grand Banks. Capes Marys and all that.
What was that about?
It was a holiday of obligation, you see.
I'm mostly garden party.
And then a big garden party, mostly a party somehow. You were
But everything would stop.
Oh, yes, that was the day.
So how did that come about? How did that tradition come about?
Well, now, you know, as far as we're concerned, it was the Blessed Virgin's Day. We VRCs, we did recognise that very solidly. Yeah. In fact, we died out everywhere now, in all the nominations. That was the day.
So what would you do then? It was a real celebration. What kind of things would you be doing on
First
that?
thing, I'd start with a mass, and two, in fact, and then in the evening, a benediction, a blessed sacrament, you know. And then after that, you go to a dance. Beat her down till daylight, if you like. Yeah.
After 3 days of stormy weather, the emotional experience of seeing old homes and friends, not to mention the partying until the wee hours, the last day of the reunion turned warm and sunny. It was fitting somehow to bring this close community together in prayer.
And I think it's an opportune time for us to give real thanks to God, really from our hearts say thanks to God for this reunion, really, because I think it has done much to recapture in us who know the situation of living in isolated islands like Merasheen and Colonnet Island and O'Dear and where have you, and also knowing the sense of values that we were imbued with in those situations, that we all left places like this knowing who we were, knowing the reason for our existence.
Hail, Queen of Heaven, the ocean star, light of the wanderer here below. Shone on thy stern, we claim thy care. Save us from peril and from woe. Mother of Christ, star of the sea, pray for
The people of Merasheen were, and I believe still are, church-minded people. But church to them, I believe it's church in the best sense of the word. It's church as a community of people who work together, who recreate together. Did you notice that? Merasheen at the reunion.
Did I ever?
Who really try to enjoy life and who pray together.
It's hard to say when a lot of these people will see each other next. Most are doubtful there will ever be a permanent settlement again on Merasheen.
What would it take?
But it'll take guts. And it's not the same as like those people are. If they were 40 or younger, they'd be back and be glad of it. But they're the same. They're not the same caliber as they were. They're gone soft. Yeah.
I would think that 90% of the people who are from Merasheen would wish to go back. I would say that many of their families that never saw Merasheen before would like to go back, but this might be just sort of a sentimental journey, you know. In reality, I believe that people will not go back to Merasheen. Had they stayed there, it would be a real fine community today. But it didn't happen that way.
Too soon, it seemed, the reunion was over. It was time for packing up and once again saying goodbye.
Now sometime in December, they turned out all the lights, and they closed the doors of their happy homes. They worked for all their lives. It will break your heart to see them walk to the boats to go away, as they bid farewell to Merasheen down in Placentia Bay. The houses now are all closed up, their windows no more will rise, and their doors will never open again to welcome you inside. No, you hear the sounds of laughter or the songs we used to sing. Those days are gone forever now, and so is Merasheen. I hope you're settled down by now in your homes across the bay. And although we're separated, we'll meet again someday. And from all of us who live far away, and from their children, we thank you for the happy homes we had in Merasheen.